welcome to Lesson 8 of the Elizabeth I GCSE lessons. This one focuses on the Northern Rebellion, or the Revolt of the Northern Earls as it's sometimes referred to, in 1569. This was the most serious threat to Elizabeth thus far in her reign. You will need, in order to complete this lesson, you will need to start on page 32 of your lesson notes booklet that looks like that, and you'll see to start off with that there is a 10-question recall quiz as a smart activity. So in a moment you need to pause this video, try and answer the 10 questions as best you can. They're all based on the knowledge that you should have gleaned in the first 7 lessons of this little module. Pause it now and have a go. Okay, welcome back. Here is the moment of truth. Here are the answers. Okay, if you got more than 5 out of 10, then well done. That's a good effort. There were some very specific questions with some very specific answers there. We're now going to move on to the main part of this lesson, which looks at the revolt of the Northern Earls, or the Northern Rebellion of 1569. What's important and interesting for a local history perspective is how involved the local area was in this revolt. You'll see in your notes lesson template booklet that Raby Castle was at the centre of the plot of the Neville and the Percy family, and Nevilles of Durham and the Percys of Northumberland, to try and overthrow Elizabeth in this revolt. And in actual fact, men loyal to Queen Elizabeth, George Bowes, who was loyal to the Queen, defended Barnard Castle against the rebels but was defeated. So this area is rich in local history, which is linked to the revolt of the Northern Earls, which makes it particularly relevant to Teesdale and the surrounding area. Now, what you're going to do, using that information and using the notes that are already provided as excerpts from the textbook in your booklet, you are going to think about some of the key players in this revolt and what they were attempting to do. So you're going to use this table here after you've read the excerpts from the textbook, the information that's in your lesson notes booklet, and you're going to look at the role of Thomas Percy, Charles Neville, Anne Percy, Jane Neville, the Duke of Norfolk, and Mary, Queen of Scots. And simply for each one, you're going to read through and you're going to think about what role they played in the revolt. What were they doing? What was their role in planning the revolt? How much did they know about the revolt? What were they supposed to do as part of the attempt to overthrow Elizabeth? What was motivating them to make the decisions that they made? So read through the information and then fill in the table for each of the key individuals, considering what role they played in this rebellion, this revolt against Elizabeth. So you need to pause this now and work on that task. Okay, so what's clear about this plot is it's very complicated and it has many strands to it. The original court controversy, the sort of whispers inside the Elizabethan court, were about the idea of marrying Mary, Queen of Scots, to the Duke of Norfolk. Now, the Duke of Norfolk was a Protestant. Mary, Queen of Scots, was a Catholic. And Mary, Queen of Scots, obviously, with a sort of claim to the throne, if she had children with another noble, Thomas Howard, the Duke of Norfolk, was another noble, then their children could possibly be the heirs to the throne if Elizabeth didn't have any children. And it was assumed by lots of people at court that because he was Protestant and Mary, Queen of Scots, was Catholic, that any children that they had would probably be brought up as Protestants anyway. So this started out as something that is about trying to deal with the issue that Elizabeth doesn't have any heirs to the throne, and she doesn't look like she's getting married anytime soon. But there's also another layer to this, because the Duke of Norfolk is good friends with the Percy family and the Neville family up in the north of England, and they had had a lot of power under Elizabeth's sister, Mary I. They were Catholic nobles. They'd had a lot of their power, wealth, and influence taken away from them when Elizabeth took over. So you've got these two things coming together. We said in earlier lessons that the problems that Elizabeth has are interconnected, and the interconnected nature of these problems, it can certainly be seen in the revolt of the Northern Earls. The issue of gender and legitimacy and whether she's going to get married or not here are linking with issues of politics and issues of religion, and that is why this plot is hatched. And the idea is they're going to march down, they're going to free Mary Queen of Scots. So the fact that Mary Queen of Scots is in England after 1566 is a clear and present danger for Elizabeth, because there she is physically in the country for people to go and rescue, to go and break out of prison and get her to take over the throne. And the Neville family and the Percy family stand to gain quite a lot by removing Elizabeth. They hope to get their power back. Now, as it transpires, and you'll see this in the information that you filled in your little table, the Percy and Neville family, in the shape of Thomas Percy and Charles Neville, they lost their nerve a little bit, and it was actually their wives that sort of pushed them into this and said, "Come on, you've got to go for it now. There's no turning back. Elizabeth already knows about it." So those women were actually instrumental in making sure that the revolt went ahead, even though their husbands were quite hesitant. So we see a cocktail of different motivations and different individuals here that are creating this revolt that comes out of the interconnected nature of the problems that Elizabeth had. What I want you to do now is to pause this and have a go at the questions underneath the table, which ask you to think about why the revolt failed, and first of all, what motivated this revolt. Was it mainly a political revolt, or was it mainly a religious revolt? Okay, so the revolt failed because the Spanish troops that were apparently going to come and help never arrived. Whether or not they were actually ever going to come is probably open to debate. Elizabeth moved Mary so that she couldn't escape, so the chances of the rebels being able to meet up with Mary and then march on London was very small, and Elizabeth was able to raise an army to crush the revolt quite decisively and emphatically, and the people in the south of England were loyal to Elizabeth, and there was little chance that they were going to march alongside the rebels anyway. The issue of the principal motivation of the rebellion is a little bit more tricky. It's a bit difficult to untangle the motivations here. On the surface of it, thinking about what the rebels were called for, the restoration of the church as it had been under Mary, when they celebrated a Catholic Mass at Durham Cathedral, that was very symbolic. Obviously, the Percys and the Nevilles were Catholic families, so there was a religious element to this. However, let's remember that the ultimate plan of the nobles is to marry the Duke of Norfolk to Mary, Queen of Scots, and the Duke of Norfolk is a Protestant, and his children would be Protestant, and so the chances of the country returning entirely to Catholicism with a marriage between Mary, Queen of Scots, and the Duke of Norfolk were probably quite slim. Yes, the Duke of Norfolk is sympathetic to Catholicism, but still, the chances are pretty slim. I think that probably what was more a principal motivation for this was a political grievance that the Neville family and the Percy family had. They'd had power under Mary, they'd had lots of wealth, and that had been taken away from them by Elizabeth, and so I think that they were operating out of a motivation, a desire to get their political power back, and they had friends at court like the Duke of Norfolk who would quite like to have had more power himself. I think the religious element to the rebellion came after the political rebellion. So it would be difficult to motivate a lot of people in the north of England, a lot of ordinary people, to rebel, because their nobles, their powerful lords, wanted to get their political power back. That's not going to be very easy to motivate people. I think it was easier to motivate people by saying, right, let's have a rebellion and we're going to restore Catholicism. And I think that was what motivated ordinary people, and that's what was able to mobilize ordinary people. But at the root of this actually was a political motivation about the Neville family and the Percy family getting their power back. Okay, we come to the last section of the lesson now. You need to read the information on page 37 and consider how significant this revolt was. So if you pause and read that information and answer the question underneath. Okay, well, the simple answer to this question is it was pretty significant. This is the first time that there'd been a major uprising against Elizabeth. The brutal way that she put the rebellion down shows that she took it very seriously. She wasn't taking any prisoners, so to speak, and it showed that there was a groundswell of opposition to her in the country. What it meant, and Parliament was mainly the motivation behind this, was that more stringent anti-Catholic laws were passed, which meant that in the future there would be more chance of Catholics breaking these laws and therefore being seen by other Catholics as martyrs. Remember, Elizabeth wanted to steer away from this idea of seeing what people's religious loyalty was and wanted people to outwardly go along with the religious settlement without her, as she said, making a window into their souls about what they believed. So now there was the potential for Catholics to be publicly prosecuted, and this would cause some to be martyrs. And the papal bull is also important. The Pope excommunicates Elizabeth. She's no longer a member of the church. She is a heretic. She is against the Catholics. Now, if you're a Catholic, your Pope, your spiritual leader in the country, the go-between between you and God, ultimately, is saying that your queen is a heretic and you shouldn't listen to her. So this means that your loyalty is tested. Are you loyal to the queen of your country, or are you loyal to your spiritual leader? So the Northern Rebellion is symbolically quite important, and it is a significant revolt. Not necessarily because they came close to removing Elizabeth from the throne, but because of what it symbolises and what it shows about how all of these different problems that Elizabeth faced were starting to come together in the late 1560s to cause more serious problems for her than had been the case in the past. Okay, there we have it. That's the end of Lesson 8. Lesson 9 will focus on further plots against Elizabeth in the 1570s and 1580s. Thank you for listening. Hope you have learned something, and until next time, goodbye.